52 will die today. Seize control of the FDA. 52 will die today. Seize control of the FDA. 52 will die today. Seize control of the FDA. 52 will die today. Seize control of the FDA. 52 will die today. Seize control of the FDA.
Where's Dan?
Today in Rockville, Maryland, AIDS commandos today. No. Angry AIDS protesters today set fire to the food and drug.
Dan, we don't want to alarm people with this AIDS thing. Now, I know people with AIDS, so I know there are responsible AIDS victims out there who shouldn't be lumped in with this violent mob.
Fact. They burned down a building. People don't just burn down buildings without good cause. Gotta be terrorists.
Well, I agree, but what I mean is we don't want to alarm people. We don't want to say that these people, while many don't agree with their tactics, they do represent an undercurrent of frustration in the country. Listen, their friends have died. They might die. They have families. Their families watch television. These are significant demographics.
Oh, well, if you think people really feel that way, then how about angry AIDS protesters today seized control of a federal office building?
Okay, 10 seconds.
Today in Washington, a group of homosexual protesters seized control of a federal office building, and before the siege was ended, the building was in flames. We obviously have a full report, and we begin tonight's presentation with Tom Garble, who is at the Food and Drug Administration in Rockville, Maryland. Tom?
They came from all over the country, from big towns and small cities, to gather in front of this building to say they are angry about AIDS.
The government is killing us, you fuckers!
Since it was first discovered in 1981, AIDS has claimed the lives of over 50,000 homosexuals and drug addicts. The government has spent tens of millions of dollars to find a cure, but so far only one promising drug, AZT, has been discovered. Yet many here say that is not enough.
What's the matter? Are you deaf?
There have been AIDS protests before, but today was a turning point. Today, this cry of protest erupted, literally, into violence.
They say get back! We say fight back! They say
It began peacefully in the morning mist, as protesters paraded for news cameras, chanting their slogans. But shortly before noon, the atmosphere changed dramatically, as a small group of commandos clad in white laboratory coats erected a flamethrower and sent sheets of fire shattering into the glass and steel structure. Within minutes, the 20-story office complex was engulfed in flames, and a new chapter written in this ongoing battle between the government and these victims, these AIDS victims. Dan?
Tom, is there any word yet on just who these AIDS terrorists are?
Dan, we have information that a shadowy group that calls itself the New Center for Drugs and Biologics has claimed responsibility for the incident. We don't know much about them, but sources inside the government describe them as extremely well-informed and extremely dangerous.
Thank you, Tom. And you'll keep us posted. More AIDS news tonight. The government announced today new guidelines designed to speed up the approval of potentially effective drugs to combat AIDS so that they may be considered for the 3-year waiting list required before testing. A spokesman said today's protest had no bearing on the decision. The guidelines, he stated, had been under consideration for over 1 year. National AIDS experts called the new guidelines a major breakthrough. When we come back, we'll have more on the story of that puppy trapped 60 feet down a well shaft in Texas, and on the outpouring of manpower, money, and yes, love that has descended on that tiny town. Tonight, veterinary teams from the Soviet Union.
Dan, Good. Now, after the puppy story, we're going to go to the baldness cure, and then we're going to...
We're the new Center for Drugs and Biologics, and we're seizing control of this news program and putting an end to the lies.
Wait, you can't!
We've done it. It's a lie. It's a sham.
No, wait till we're on the air. 10 seconds. Over here. Right here. 10 seconds, everyone. Fabulous. 5, 3, 2...
We're the new Center for Drugs and Biologics, and we're seizing control of this news program and putting an end to the lies.
My camera, my news. Television journalism can't be held hostage by animals like you. The people out there depend on me. I keep America on top of the world.
Oh, roll over, America!
Your news is a lie. We die, and you turn out the same biased garbage, the same government experts, the same whitewash. Tonight, we're the news.
Tonight, hear the real experts. Listen to the witnesses. We've taken over your satellite, and our guerrilla video network will be feeding in the faces and voices of the real AIDS crisis.
Fabulous.
Today in Rockville, 10,000 joyful people with AIDS, along with their friends and families, destroyed the desiccated hull of an American bureaucracy that has condemned hundreds of thousands of Americans to die when they needn't have.
That's absurd, folks. If American citizens were dying, you'd have heard it here first.
Since the earliest days of the epidemic, federal agencies refused to address the needs of citizens they considered marginal, the homosexual, the addict. But as awareness of the danger spread in the affected communities, we made suggestions for a swift and intelligent response to the new virus. But the government turned a blind eye on the AIDS crisis. In the age of Reagan, people would have to care for themselves.
Okay, we're ready with the San Francisco uplink.
The average drug in the United States takes 7 years to gain marketing approval. In light of the facts of AIDS, this is unacceptable. The new Center for Drugs and Biologics is inviting the communities most affected by AIDS to submit detailed programs on how to speed up the drug approval process. Can you hear us in San Francisco?
Are we on? We need to shorten the approval time for new drugs so that people with HIV infection can make intelligent decisions about their own bodies, their own lives. If a drug has proven safe and might be effective, I want to decide whether or not to try it. So we are asking for greater access to experimental treatments for post-phase 1 trials.
But that isn't enough. We want drug sponsors to continue monitoring a drug's effectiveness and side effects even after it's made available to people who need it.
Thank you, San Francisco. Is New York City ready?
My baby has AIDS. What can I do for my baby?
Well, let's consult a hospital in your neighborhood.
Well, if you sign your baby up for my trial, there's a chance we'll give her a promising drug. But there's also a chance that we'll give her nothing. That's how science goes. There's no choice. Controlled trials, controlled patients. Controlled trial, controlled patients. Controlled trial, controlled patients.
Oh, look, I think we might be able to think of some kind of choice.
Using sugar pills or placebos on HIV drug trial participants means these people will receive no treatment, and they may never find out until it's too late. The new Center for Drugs and Biologics realizes that this is coercive and unethical. The new center also realizes that with HIV infection, using placebo-controlled trials is impractical.
Yeah, it takes longer to enroll people in placebo trials. And besides, placebos encourage people to take drugs while they're on the trials. So the research value is useless. Meanwhile, we're still waiting.
Therefore,
from today until the end of the AIDS epidemic, FDA personnel will no longer approve placebo-controlled trials for people with HIV infection.
rather, they will ensure that all drug trial participants are offered experimental treatment.
This is unheard of. Who do you people think you are? How dare you let ordinary people question the judgment of professional men of science? Where are our experts?
I've got your experts. AIDS has spawned a whole industry of whores who justify the government's criminal neglect. Your experts are bought and sold media pigs who'll justify the most immoral opinions. And you put them on the air to provide balance.
Fairness dictates that we provide balancing opinions. This is American television.
Oh, a dictatorship of fairness. One idiot suggests branding in concentration camps, while the liberal view argues that we be allowed to die a slow death. You call that fairness? Where's the face that I recognize? Where's the voice that says what I feel?
If real people felt the way you do, they'd be on television.
5 seconds. Cue experts. Roll experts.
If it can be transmitted through heterosexual intercourse, penis-vagina, through the vaginal mucosal wall, we would have tens of thousands of cases. We don't.
It may be necessary with small numbers of people to at least use the threat of some kind of a backup fine or other measure to encourage them to act responsibly.
Yes, quarantine will be a necessity somewhere down the road.
It's not business as usual. We're at war.
Dr. Frank Young, we thank you for being with us.
Thank you.
I think the country is doing the best they can.
Now those are experts.
We're ready from Texas.
Howdy. I'm in an AIDS drug trial. I've had pneumonia once and I want to take one of them drugs to keep it from coming back. But they didn't have them prophylactics when I signed on to this thing, but it seems crazy not to take something to keep it away. But my doc says I can't. Well, hell, I'm going to see if I can't change his mind.
Well, that's an argument that I can believe.
Several drugs have proven effective in preventing the recurrent opportunistic infections that plague people with HIV. Yet many HIV drug trials ban participants from taking such prophylactic or preventative drugs.
Is that authorized?
The new Center for Drugs and Biologics realizes that such a ban puts trial participants at indefensible risk and is therefore unethical.
If that wasn't authorized, you're in big trouble.
The new
Oh,
center,
good. Now you're catching on.
The new center also realizes that since it holds back trial enrollments, banning prophylaxis is impractical.
Finally, the new center realizes that there's no scientific reason why a person in a trial for an antiviral drug or a drug that boosts the immune system should not also be able to take a drug to fight an infection.
Therefore, from today until the end of the AIDS epidemic, FDA personnel will no longer approve clinical trials that ban concurrent prophylaxis for people with HIV infection.
Furthermore, when an ongoing trial bans prophylaxis, FDA will see to it that investigators allow the drug trial participants to begin or resume taking prophylactic drugs.
Let's take some questions from our viewers.
I hear they've been gathering information on the people who first started taking AZT. I'm taking AZT myself. What are the long-term results?
I live in New York and I have AIDS. I'm on AZT, but it's making me really sick. Are there any trials for any other drugs that I can get into?
I'm enrolled in a drug trial, but I feel that my health is failing. Where can I get my test results?
Now those are all reasonable questions. Let's go to Washington and try to get some answers.
Yes, I'm the official at NIAID in charge of processing trial results. No, I'm sorry, I can't give you my name. Look, I've got my hands full trying to manage all the bad publicity we've been getting. Can you imagine what my life would be like if I had to answer every petty question from every civilian who thought he had a right to know what was in our pills? There are pills. It's not our job to make people better. This is pure science. It's a big business. There are billions at stake here, not to mention my career. You want information? Talk to Burroughs Wellcome. That's where I'm going when I leave this pissant job. That's where the real money is.
The new Center for Drugs and Biologics realizes that for a clinical trial participant, that clinical trial serves as health care. Information is essential so that doctors and patients can make intelligent treatment decisions.
Therefore, from now until the end of the AIDS epidemic, the new Center for Drugs and Biologics directs FDA personnel to compile and release accurate, timely information on all HIV drug trials. And they should make the companies release their protocol information, including final trial results as soon as the trials are completed, and preliminary data as soon as it's available.
Let's take a peek at Wall Street.
My company is interested in this AIDS thing, but we're worried that any promising drugs we discover are going to be outmoded before we can recoup our marketing costs. What if they discover some wonder drug?
Well, you don't have to worry about that. Most insiders in the AIDS industry are talking about a cocktail approach to HIV infection. See, AIDS won't be treated with a single drug, but rather with a whole range of products. And that could ensure plenty of action for those that can afford to sit down at the table. This thing could be bigger than skincare.
No, well, what if there's an economic downturn?
AIDS is going to continue to spread on a pandemic basis. It's a recession-proof growth industry with a big payoff to an aggressive outfit. No pain, no gain.
The new Center for Drugs and Biologics realizes that humanizing clinical trials and speeding up the approval process will not ensure that the drugs that are finally approved are ever available to the people who need them.
In 8 years, only 3 new drugs have been approved to treat AIDS-related conditions. 2 of these drugs, AZT and alpha interferon, each cost about $10,000 a year. Companies should not be able to make obscene profits off drugs like AZT that were developed at the taxpayer's expense. Therefore,
the new Center for Drugs and Biologics instructs the federal health bureaucracy to ensure that no drug that is developed with government money will ever be licensed exclusively to one company.
Yeah, and the new center also believes that a drug company should make an expensive drug available free of charge to people who need it but cannot afford it. And that the company will, in defense of its asking price, open its books to the government and the public.
Medicaid and private health insurance will have to reimburse people with life-threatening conditions for all the procedures associated with experimental treatment, just as it does with approved treatments.
Okay, we've gone to commercial there. That's great. You are a natural. Let's just give you a little fluff.
We didn't come down here to get your hairdos.
You took over the TV station. What you sees is what you get. 5 seconds. 2 seconds. You're on.
We've talked about what happens to people who get into drug trials. But what about those people who aren't even allowed into trials to take their chances with the placebos and the restrictions?
XIV drug users, hemophiliacs, and children aren't even eligible for most AIDS drug trials.
I was a real drag. I was shooting a lot of stuff at the time, and my old lady said maybe I ought to go get tested. She was reading about all this stuff and all, and so they told me I had it. So I went down and they were going to give me this stuff, AZT, but I'm not using it anymore. So because I'm not using it, I can't get into the program. But, I mean, it's more expensive than the junk I was using. And it's really fucked up. I can't pay for it myself.
Hello, I'm a hemophiliac, and I have AIDS. I've received many transfusions over the past few years, so that's probably where I got it. I'm also gay, but I haven't done anything that should have put me at risk, although the doctors don't believe that. My problem is that there are no approved drug treatments for hemophiliacs, nor are there any experimental drug trials that are open to us. When I ask the FDA why, they tell me God helps those who help themselves.
Hi, I'm 9 years old, and the doctors say I have AIDS, there's no treatments for kids like me. But they say there's an experiment 1,000 miles away. But my parents are poor, so I guess I have to stay here and die. Do you think maybe Nancy Reagan would help me? Since she's like, the wife of the president? She like does all this stuff. I don't know. Maybe.
Finally, an innocent victim. Now that's what I call a news story. Cute kid, tough break.
The new Center for Drugs and Biologics realizes it's the moral and legal responsibility of the FDA to ensure equal access to experimental treatment for all HIV-infected people.
Yeah, it also realizes that it's a stupid policy to approve a drug before it's been tested in all populations affected by the disease.
Therefore,
from today until the end of the AIDS epidemic, FDA personnel will no longer approve HIV drug trials that eliminate any segment of the HIV-infected population for any reasons other than valid medical reasons.
Furthermore, if there are valid medical reasons why a particular population should be excluded from a trial, a sponsor will have to conduct a parallel trial for that segment of the population.
In addition, the new Center for Drugs and Biologics advises that from today until the end of the AIDS epidemic, institutional review boards will reject protocols unless they are accompanied by a detailed, culturally sensitive community outreach plan.
The issue is justice.
Aha, the hidden agenda.
No, the revealed conditions behind the AIDS crisis. Where would we be in this epidemic had it been caused by aspirin tampering, or had it stricken the American Legion?
2 years ago, most of us never would have conceived of marching in the streets, much less using flamethrowers and hijacking television stations. The truth is, we never saw what was happening around us. We never saw behind the facade.
That is until it hit home. Until we realized that the system was killing us, and we started trying to figure out what was happening.
Slowly we educated ourselves. We began to analyze the bureaucracy and the politics.
We read stacks of tedious protocols and contracts.
Yeah, we learned medical terminology and the tricks of the budget manipulators.
And slowly a pattern began to emerge. The very people with the first-hand knowledge of the epidemic were the last to be consulted. And while we were waiting for kind words and crumbs from the liberal managers of the epidemic, we realized that they were simply links in the chain of command.
It wasn't a question of saving lives or even of saving money. It was about power.
Well, when the first PWA chose to sit down and be dragged off in the middle of Wall Street, we started to take back some of that power.
Wait, just a minute. There's a bulletin coming in. My God! City Hall is in flames. And the mayor is swimming to New Jersey.